Christine Rose, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have a chance to chat with you. We're going to be discussing today the impact of COVID-19 and how managers can help people on their teams navigate COVID generally, but then we're also going to focus about women in the workplace and how we can help women navigate this kind of new dynamic, this new situation that we all find ourselves in, so that everyone can be their best selves and find great opportunities at work each and every day. As we get started, I just wanted to share Christine's bio with the listeners. A mom of 2 adult girls, Christine Rose is passionate about safety and justice for women. An award-winning business and executive coach, she is the owner of Christine Rose Coaching and Consulting, and she helps CEOs grow their leadership, innovative teams, and profitable companies. Prior to starting her company, Christine was director of development at Attain Housing, a Washington state-based nonprofit homeless housing provider, and held multiple roles in business development. Christine is the author of the Amazon #1 new release, Life Beyond Me Too, Creating a Safer World for Our Mothers, Daughters, Sisters, and Friends, endorsed by premier CEO coach Marshall Goldsmith. She is also a co-author with peak performance coach Jim Britt and Shark Tank star Kevin Harrington on the new volume 4 in the best-selling series for entrepreneurs, Cracking the Rich Code. Christine holds a bachelor's in business from Georgetown University and a certificate in fundraising management from the University of Washington, and graduated from Coach U's Advanced Corporate Coaching Program. A credentialed Washington State Board member of International Coaching Federation, a certified psychological safety coach with the Fearless Organization, and a certified core values coach with Taylor Protocols, and a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Christine's insights are featured on Forbes.com, Public Interest Radio, National Business Radio, and international media sites. What a great background, what a great career that you have, and I'm really excited to have the chance to chat about all things related to women in the workplace, but specifically, around this pandemic.
Thanks, John. This is a challenging time for everybody, no matter where you're coming from. And it's been especially challenging for women in a lot of ways.
Yeah. As we launch into this discussion, is there anything you would like to share with the listeners, by way of further introduction or personal context or anything like that?
Well, I do want to tell you, you can pick up a copy of Life Beyond #MeToo on Amazon.com, and the Kindle version's on sale right now for under $5. So it's just a great time to get it, and it's a resource for leaders in organizations. It's not just for women. It's not just about recovering from your Me Too story. It's not just about my story. It really is for helping leaders and change makers, influencers, to get a deep understanding of why this issue isn't going away, and how we got the way where things are, and what we can do to really create deep culture change. So I just want to encourage people to pick that up from Amazon.com.
Yeah, excellent.
While the price is low, because I'm not in control of right now of how they're raising and lowering prices, and so. And kind of retro, just retroactive gift to you, I guess, for the Women's Equality Day, which was last week.
Yeah, wonderful. And what a great resource. So I appreciate that. And, as we launch into the discussion today, I thought maybe we could just start with your take on how this pandemic is impacting women in the workplace. You mentioned how it's hard for everyone, but particularly for women. So share with our listeners the kind of your perspective on why that is the case and why women are struggling.
It really has. There's a great article or post by Deanna LaFauci in Linkage in the Leadership Insights that I hope people are following. But this pandemic has magnified and worsened systemic inequalities in the U.S. in the workplace, first of all, there's a greater share of burden of home care duties, kind of caring for children. And, you know, I guess on the plus side, what it's done is open some eyes to the amount of energy that it takes to really effectively educate the next generation, and you know, the work that goes into that. But we have a system where a great disproportion of unpaid care falls upon women right now, and especially single moms. And if you're a Black woman in the U.S., you're bearing more disproportionate care duties there too, and also not just for kids, but for the seniors now. So people are juggling more than they've had to. And what the research is showing is that even working from home, women are disadvantaged because they're being put in the role of primary caregiver, even if there are two working couples, you know, two working partners at home. So one partner is more likely now to be able to keep their job, is more likely to be able to advance, and one is struggling, and it's gender-based. Another issue is that healthcare issues are more biased, and women are struggling with those things. Leaving to take care of healthcare has been harder for them. And there's also an epidemic of domestic violence happening around the world, not just in the US and in your town, because there's an increased risk of people when they're in a situation where there's a controlling partner, when there are caregivers or women who are staying home with partners, and now that their companies are giving them the option of working from home, their controlling partner is requiring them to work from home. And there have been just dramatic spikes in reports of domestic abuse. So it's one thing for employers to be thinking about is, how are we making sure that we're providing safety for our employees? It's a challenge that they addressed physically when we were physically working together, but it's a challenge to be thinking about for women who are more likely to be victims of violence in the home as well right now. Like, how do we make sure that we check in on people in a safe way, to make sure that there's reporting? Of course, all the reporting is public service and is protected, and you know, it's been open, but it's still really challenging for people in those situations, especially to get the help they need.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for providing kind of that framing for the unique challenges that various minority groups are facing. You're absolutely right. So there's just so much evidence, so much research to demonstrate the systemic, disproportionately negative impacts on women, on people of color, on these various minority groups, that they absolutely share the brunt. Or they take on the greater brunt of the load in these types of difficult situations. And I know, like in my own home, I like to think that my wife and I have a very balanced sort of relationship. But we're both working from home. We have 6 children who are all doing online school. We're trying to balance it with childcare, with home, with taking care of things in the home. And it is absolutely a challenge. And we're fortunate enough to have a situation where we both have jobs that can be fully remote, and that we have the means and the technologies to be able to assist our kids with their online schooling. You know, but that's not always the case, right? And so you do find dramatic differences across, you know, in the aggregate, not obviously not in every situation, but in the aggregate, so much of the load ends up falling on women to try to pick up, the child care, the homeschooling care, just all that kind of stuff when we're in this pandemic moment. And you add on top of that, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the, just the social turmoil, that's present in the US right now and in many other parts of the world. And so, being a woman is extra challenging, navigating work in this COVID dynamic. But being a woman of color would be even more challenging, and just start adding on, these different types of profiles that, are disproportionately, systematically negatively impacted.
Yeah. And John, when you think about the pay gap, especially, I mean, we just had, Black Women's Equal Pay Day, and when Black women are earning less than 62% of what a white man's earning for, same jobs, and, for women overall earning just a little over 81% more, of what a man earns for the same work, they're not able to save at the same rate either. So for women, actually, women in that demographic have 30% less overall savings. And so they're tapping into that, and, they're hitting kind of crisis levels sooner. And it is even harder for women of color. It's really a challenging time.
So what thoughts do you have about what managers can do to help women navigate it within this dynamic? So, considering, and not just COVID, not just the pandemic, but generally speaking, even in times where we're not in lockdown and we're not in social isolation situations, women still disproportionately had to do more of the childcare and the housework and all those sorts of things. And so, the ability to have flexible work schedules and to work virtually sometimes, and to be able to have boundaries around how work, shifts over into home life and working weekends, and, all that kind of stuff, all the, the things we typically talk about in terms of work-life balance, disproportionately negatively impacted women. And now it's just a heightened level during the pandemic. So what do you think a manager listening to this podcast can do today to start making a difference and moving the needle in terms of the experience for women in the workplace?
Well, John, I would say a lot of managers are already doing much more than they may have thought they could. And I have to give kudos and props to them, because they're listening and they have been stretched beyond belief, and they're already, many of them are women. And so they're already working. And then it's, in addition to offering flexibility in schedules, which is really key, part of this just creating that climate in your teams for psychologically safe conversations. And that is just, are we open? Are we being real? If it's a team meeting and it's not a public facing meeting, is it okay to show up without taking the extra 20 minutes to put the makeup on, which is a systemic, I don't know, an issue that women have to face that, I mean, guys, let me just tell you, I see you on Zoom, and the women with the makeup on, they've got that culturally acceptable look. But hey, if it's just a team and you really don't need to do that, maybe, is it okay to change the rules there and just say, you know what, for team meetings, let's forget about the makeup? And is it okay to show up and have a kid walk behind you, because the only place you can put your computer right now is in that spot in the dining room, because all the bedrooms are taken? And, just to not freak out about somebody's kid walking behind them, to create this safe environment for each team member. And there's times where, you need to present that public face, and definitely just let people know what's expected. But there are times where it would just take a lot of pressure off if you recognize that the intelligence and the work ethic of the person that you hired is still there, and they're pushing and they're doing everything they can. And to have conversations where it's safe to learn together. If you're not used to working remotely, I mean, people have come a long way in the last 4 months on learning how to work remotely with teams. But, you know, checking in with your team about how safe is it to say, I don't know how to use the video conferencing invitations on Microsoft Teams, so that they can ask you instead of asking their brother-in-law. You know, is it safe to just check in and say, I need to learn this? Do we have learner safety? Is it safe to be able to contribute where you're at? You know, you've got these people on your teams that are experienced and have earned their chops, and now they want to contribute, and maybe they want to contribute something new that could be innovative and really helpful to your organization as you're flexing in this time. And have you provided an opportunity where all voices are heard, and on Zoom with the mute button, everybody's staying on mute, you may get through meetings and not hear from some of your people, but where are they having an opportunity to contribute? And
Yeah.
another thing is just providing an opportunity for your teams to challenge the status quo. Right now, if you've got teams that can say to you, just because we've always done it this way, I mean, right now, everything is up in the open for discussion. And when you create that environment for your team for everything to be open, and you just remove the fear, you're going to get so much more out of your team. And not only that, they're going to love working with you, because where else do you have that where there's no fear? So this is a great time to do what Amy Edmondson says and create that fearless organization, because that's where the innovation is going to come from that you need to fuel you into the future right now.
Yeah, well, everything you said, I completely agree with, and you know, it's applicable beyond, you know, the scope of women in the workplace. It's really good leadership, and it's about how to manage a good team in any environment, particularly in a digital kind of virtual workspace, and particularly for women. So I think it's important to consider all those things. And there are a couple of things you said that I wanted to drill down on just a little bit. One of the things you really emphasized just a moment ago was the importance of creating a safe space. That is really vital, and there's, you know, that could be a long discussion in and of itself, just to really explore how we can go about creating a safety culture, a safe environment for people to dissent, to challenge, to question, to disrupt. You know, the best organizations encourage disruption, right? Because it's that challenging, it's that that constructive dissent that will push the boundaries and help us create, you know, new innovative products and services and new processes, you know, things to improve the organization. But it's my experience that most organizations aren't particularly good at fostering that kind of an environment, because it is threatening. It challenges the status quo, and people are comfortable with the status quo. And generally, in terms of human nature, we just don't like change, and we don't like to move into the darkness, you know, in uncertainty. And so there's lots of organizations that kind of systematically try to put down that kind of questioning, that kind of challenging. And it can be a challenge for anybody, but I think particularly for women, it's more of a tightrope to walk, because there's all these unrealistic expectations placed upon women in terms of social norms and what, you know, how they would appropriately challenge somebody, that men just don't face. And so it's really a tightrope, I think. Thoughts on what leaders can do to truly create that safe space, to you know, take away the tightrope and, like, say, you know, maybe it's still a bit of a balance beam. I suppose it's a balance beam for everybody, but at least a wider beam, you know, that people can walk down as they're trying to navigate the politics of challenging thinking and challenging the status quo, making it a little bit more fair for women so they can voice, you know, their concerns.
Oh, John, that's a great question. You know, one thing a manager can do is just to have a filter of, would I ask that question to a person of the opposite gender? And if you just kind of filter your questions that go out through that filter, you might find that there are some things that, or, you know, when I make that statement to the opposite gender, but when it comes to speaking your thoughts assertively and, you know, really defending an idea and speaking your mind, some of those things can be really challenging if in that cultural norm for women. There's, like you said, there's a tightrope. And so are you critiquing the idea? Or are you critiquing a gender biased norm that no longer really is going to help your organization? And so be just checking to see, you know, is that the same? If that, you know, if somebody asked that question that was a different gender, would I even respond with this response? Or, you know, am I, it might show you a way of opening your mind to receiving the brilliance, the thoughts that come from whoever it is in your team. Another thing to do is to provide different ways of bringing input. So besides just at team meetings, you know, how else can people bring input? And are there ways that people can contribute thoughts and ideas that are welcome? And do you have that systematized so that there's a safe, known way to participate and bring new ideas, where you really examine them and, you know, they get a moment to be considered?
Yeah, great thoughts, great thoughts. Another, you know, question I had as you were sharing this experience of women during the pandemic. You know, you have a best-selling book about the Me Too movement. Now things have shifted, obviously. You know, fewer people are together in the physical workspace, so I suspect that that would have implications for the number of harassment complaints and types of different, you know, difficult situations that women might be put in a traditional workplace. But on the other hand, I wonder, I have no idea about this, by the way, but I wonder if virtual meetings have created a new space for predators, for abusers to assert themselves against women. You know, because I think if I'm in a physical workspace and I'm a perpetrator and it's a challenge, you know, there's certain things I have to consider as I'm trying to behave in unhealthy ways. I have to be aware of my surroundings, right? I have to be aware of who's around, who could see us, who could observe us. If it's just me and I'm doing like this one-on-one Zoom call with somebody, you know, what's keeping me from, you know, taking off that filter, from saying inappropriate things, from putting inappropriate pressure on somebody? What could leaders do to try to protect, well, anybody really, any of their workers, but particularly women in that kind of a virtual environment where they may be getting advances or they may be getting inappropriate behaviors that are happening that maybe other people can't observe because it's all virtual?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that stuff is happening. So making sure that your whole team is aware of laws and of what harassment is, and to really encourage reporting. And, you know, in organizations, is your human resources, is your reporting system set up to get to the truth, or is it set up to protect your organization from financial loss? So this might be a time to really look at how is reporting taken in your organization. I mean, just think about Susan Fowler's memo at her strange year working at Uber. And, you know, when stuff can happen by email, internal email in organizations, it can happen on Zoom, it can happen on Teams and Slack, you know. So it's a little bit harder because it's public, but in private conversations, you know, they're not that private anymore, and it's pretty easy to share. But what are you doing with that information? And this is a leadership issue. This is this is what's happening at the top level of your organization, because that's where the culture is determined right there. And if they take this seriously, you're gonna have systems and processes in place to be listening, to be checking in. And when somebody reports something, you know, you're gonna be more likely to believe it, or at least find out if it's a credible claim. There's always, in the book I talked about, that there's always a risk that there's some false reporting, but it's very minuscule compared to the risk of not reporting at all. And what happens in organizations where there's abuse or harassment going on is, if it's not safe to report and claims aren't taken seriously and they're not dealt with effectively, you lose good talent that you paid money to recruit, onboard, train, and work with. You're losing good talent. Companies can lose people even now. And right now there's a talent war going on. There's a lot of people who are laid off and looking to move and making changes. And so you want to keep your good people. So make sure that your structure is set up to encourage reporting. There's different kinds of discrimination and harassment that can happen right now during this virtual time. And also there's retaliations going on. So if there's someone who experienced harassment and has reported, and there's a structure in the organization that doesn't take claims seriously, now they're at a great point of retaliating by laying people off or firing people really unjustly and attributing it to financial reason or budget reason. So you could be getting sued for wrongful discrimination too. So make sure that you have all your records in place. But it's, really it's about caring for your people and having that culture from the top down, that we just care about our people, and we've created a great place to work, and we love working together, and we're sharing the care of providing the services and products to our customers that is making the world a better place. And we want that to be all how we work together.
Excellent tips. Christine, it has been a real pleasure talking with you today. We're about out of time, but before we part ways, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the listeners what they can do to get connected with you and find out more about your book and anything else that may be coming up.
Yeah, I actually work with CEOs of small to mid-sized companies and do coaching and consulting for firms of those size usually. To reach out to me, you can find me on my website, which is currently under construction. I have a new one coming along, but the old one has the blog still, www.christinerose.coach. And you can find my book on Amazon.com, Life Beyond #MeToo, Creating a Safer World for Our Mothers, Daughters, Sisters, and Friends.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. It has been a real pleasure talking with you. I encourage my listeners to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Christine can do for you. Check out her book. I hope everyone stays healthy and safe, that everyone can continue to find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope everyone has a great week. Thank you.